This is Henry Vogelman of the Vogelman Law Firm with another video blog. This one's a little quicker than I had originally planned, and it's based on, well, my son came home from school and he asked me about freedom of speech in schools, and so I explained to him the key case, which is Tinker versus Des Moines. And then I thought other students might be interested in knowing their rights, so I'm creating a video blog to help with that. Tinker versus Des Moines, like most things that are part of this great experiment we call America, understanding the history is helpful. What happened, the basics of Tinker versus Des Moines is that students were protesting the Vietnam War. This occurs in 1965. To understand what's going on, the Vietnam War, well, it goes on for a long time. The French are in, the United States are in. In 1960, when the Kennedy administration takes over from the Eisenhower administration, Clark Clifford, he's the guy who's in charge of transition for the Kennedy administration, he writes in his book that one of the things that the Eisenhower administration was relieved about is they would not have to address the quagmire that was Indochina. Indochina is where Vietnam is. Kennedy gets in and he's dealing with this. By the end of the Kennedy administration in 1963, there are up to 15,000 U.S. advisors in country. Vietnam is not stabilizing. There are lots of problems. Americans do not understand it. We don't understand how it affects us. And there are issues that are, even in 63, you're starting to see the country divide. 1964 rolls around and we have an incident at Tonkin Gulf. So according to the incidents, of our destroyers get shot at and there's kind of a crisis. Out of this comes the Tonkin Gulf Resolution. If you don't mind, I'm going to read it to you so you can understand what's going on in 65 when this protest occurs. This is what our U.S. Congress says. Resolved by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that Congress approves and supports the determination of the President as Commander-in-Chief to take all necessary measures to repel any armed attack against the forces of the United States and to prevent further aggression. Section 2. The United States regards as vital to its national interest and to world peace the maintenance of international peace and security in Southeast Asia, consonant with the Constitution of the United States and the Charter of the United Nations, and in accordance with the obligations under Southeast Asia Collective Defense Treaty, the United States is therefore prepared, as the President determines, to take all necessary steps, including armed force, to assist any member or protocol state of the Southeast Asia Collective Defense Treaty requesting assistance in defense of its freedom. So in 1964, we have this confusing issue. The population of the country is already starting to divide, and we're going to all of a sudden commit troops. And Congress has divorced itself. They're saying, we're not going to be responsible, it's all going to be the President. If you think about what we're going through with terrorists today, you may want to pay attention to those resolutions. What happens is we start with bombing. It's called Operation Rolling Thunder. We're going to bomb Vietnam back into the Stone Age. That doesn't work. As we enter 1965, we have 200,000 troops committed to Vietnam. That's what's happening when these students begin their protest. Tinker, the student involved, his parents are anti-war protesters. He wants to find a way to protest too. His solution is that he and a group of students, they're going to wear black armbands to school. They're not going to disrupt class. They're not going to talk. In fact, they're not even going to talk about it. They're just going to put on black armbands and go to school. The Des Moines School District hears about the policy and they pass a rule that says no black armbands can be worn in school. So a case is filed and they're asking for an injunction. An injunction is an order of the court saying the school district can't enforce its policy. So that's what Tinker wants. It ends up in the U.S. Supreme Court and becomes a standard case, the standard case for what happens for school protest and free speech in school. The interesting thing when you think about the history of Vietnam, these students, one of them was 15 years old at the time he does the protest. the draft, which occurs in 1969, that's also when the Supreme Court case is heard, he's eligible for the draft at the time that we put it in place. So these students were protesting things that were very personal and important to them. There's a quote, and it's probably the most famous quote from the court. It's not necessarily my favorite, but it's the most famous from the court itself. The First Amendment rights applied in light of special characteristics of school environment are available to teachers and students. It can hardly be argued that either students or teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. That becomes the standard that we review. You don't give up your freedom of speech when you enter a school. However, the court goes on, and it does explain that there are special reasons to protest in schools, and there are special limitations because it's a school. As the court noted in the Tinker case itself, regulations of lengths of skirts, the type of clothing, the hairstyle, or deportment, which is discipline, were not part of the case. It did not concern aggressive, disruptive action, or even demonstrations. In this section, the court is trying to explain to students and really to citizens, if you want to protest school policy, a student doing that in school, probably not going to be appropriate. If you asked me what you should do if you want to protest school policy, my advice would be first talk to your parents and then present it before the school board in public meeting. School boards all across the country have public meetings, and that's what they're designed for, is to discuss their policies. And this actually, if you think about protests, is probably a better solution as you're actually getting your concerns before the decision makers, which is where you want it. The court actually held, the holding in the Tinker case, holding is what the court finally orders. It says this: a student's rights, therefore, do not embrace merely the classroom hours. When he is in the cafeteria, or on the playing field, or on the campus during authorized hours, he may express his opinions, even on controversial subjects like the conflict in Vietnam. If he does so without materially and substantially interfering with the requirements of appropriate discipline in the operation of the school, and without colliding with the rights of others. But conduct by the student in the class or out of it, which for any reason, whether it stems from time, place, or type of behavior, materially disrupts classwork or involves substantial disorder or invasion of the rights of others, is, of course, not immunized by the constitutional guarantee of freedom of speech. What the court's saying here is if you're going to protest, you can't disrupt the school day. So, for example, you decide you want to protest a proposed gun law, and so you're going to wear black armbands just like they did in Tinker. Probably that's okay. If, however, when you go into your classroom, you're talking about why you're wearing the black armband in your protest instead of following the instructions of the teacher, you're not going to be protected. So you want to think about this, and if you choose to exercise free speech, you should always take it very seriously. Well, there are quotes from the case that I like, so I'm just going to read them. They're more generally about what a school and a classroom is than about free speech. The court noted that schools are educating the young for citizenship. This is the reason for scrupulous protection of constitutional freedoms of the individual. If we are not to strangle the free mind at its source and teach our young to discount the important principles of our government as mere platitude. Schools are where we create citizenship. We're trying to create that free mind that will respect our experiment of individual freedom. This quote to me seems especially relevant today in a time when we're talking about curriculum and Common Core and high-stakes testing. I'm concerned that we're forgetting that what we really need to be creating in our public schools is people who will participate in our great experiment of individual freedom, and not necessarily automatons to work in a factory and do everything they're told. The other quote, it's about what a classroom is, and I'm a former teacher, so it's really probably my favorite quote of the case. The classroom is particularly the marketplace of ideas. The nation's future depends on leaders trained through wide exposure to that robust exchange of ideas which discovers truth out of the magnitude of tongues, rather than through any kind of authoritative selections. I just love this idea of a classroom as the marketplace of ideas. I love this idea of leadership, our future leaders, who experience a wide variety of knowledge, and that's how they determine what truth is. When you consider that our nation was born out of what at the time had to seem like a crazy idea, that the individual is more important than the state, and that's where we go from, and that's what creates our experiment today in individual freedom. To me, it gives me hope that there's this marketplace of ideas where we're teaching future leaders of the United States how they should proceed, how they should think. If you are a student and you choose to protest in schools, think very seriously about it. This is serious business. Tinker was about very serious issues, including students who would actually die in Vietnam. Also, when you're in school, I want you to think about that marketplace of ideas. I guess I want to end, I just want to take a moment to thank all of the teachers who, day in, day out, encourage students in that marketplace of ideas. And I want to thank the students who will be my future leaders for participating in that marketplace.